And you've just heard Tower by Jack Hinks, which is taken from his album Kintsugi. And I'm so pleased to be joined by Jack now. Hello, Jack.
Hello, thank you for having me.
It's always a pleasure, and especially thank you for joining us from Toronto. That's way beyond the call of duty. So tell us about Kintsugi, because could you describe it as a concept album?
I think I would, yeah. For the longest time, it's been, I guess, like a concept album that I've been working on obliquely. I never set out with like a topic or a mission statement, as it were. It sort of came together naturally over years, but I think it's become a concept album, which I think is probably the best way of putting it. Yeah. Kintsugi, for those who aren't aware, is uh, ceramic repair practice of Japanese origin, wherein, if you've got a bowl or a vase or something and it splits or it breaks, instead of throwing it away or trying to hide the imperfections and the cracks, it highlights the damages by repairing it with gold laced glue, which like creates a really interesting, unique design that I think is all about embracing the the journey that a piece or a person has taken to where they are and highlights imperfections rather than feeling the need to hide them. And I thought that was a lovely metaphor for grief and a lovely metaphor for healing.
And so grief is at the key is of it because we'll talk about the listening guide booklet in a moment, but which comes kind of alongside it. But can you break down the stages of grief and how it relates to the songs on the album? It's this the Kubler-Ross stages of grief.
Correct, yeah. So there's five stages of grief, in order, as it were. It starts with denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and then finally acceptance. And that's over time, I guess, been the foundation that a lot of assumptions, or like not even necessarily assumptions, a lot of how we view grief has been based around that, and the fact that we can break it up into sort of more manageable stages rather than just looking at it as a contorted mess. But I love that as a metaphor for how we process things, whether like because grief or trauma, whether that's a painful or a good word, you can have like good trauma, I guess, like the impact of a certain event or a moment in your life will have ripples and different effects from it. And I really liked the idea of exploring one event from five different angles. Because previously most of my work had been um, focused on, I guess, like an event that I would categorize as, oh, this was sad, or this was like the end of a relationship, or this was, a mourning loss of a friend or a family member or something like that. But I realized that I'd only ever written about things from the sad or like, I guess, depression stage. And I thought it would be, I guess, a more holistic way to look at grief as well as, I guess, a songwriting challenge to see if I could channel different, I guess, emotions linked with the same event. So that's essentially it. But the Kubler-Ross scale is entirely, I guess, if there were two sources of inspiration for this album, it would be Kintsugi as a theme and also the Kubler-Ross stages of grief, but trying to turn that into a cyclical listening experience or event rather than grief goes from A to B and that's it. Like there's so many different multiplicities going on with any situation in life that I feel it's hard to divorce any event from the context around it. So I wanted to make the album cyclical, and it starts and ends the same and flows throughout as I at least experience grief.
Yeah, and I think that's absolutely right because often I think people see the idea of stages and go, you almost tick them off as you go by, which of course is not
Exactly.
the way it works at all. And and often you experience some of these things at one time or a number at the same time the way that it goes through. So I think that idea of it being a circular cyclical state is one which kind of strikes me as being right.
I
And
appreciate that. Yeah.
do they relate to the songs directly? You know, do you say, well, this stage relates to this track, or is it more complex than that?
It's I think that's pretty much it. But my hope with the album at least is that I put it together with there are five I guess, single tracks and 5 interlude tracks that weave it all together, so that there's no silence at any point in the album. So I wrote the 5 tracks to each relate to one of the stages of grief, but part of the intrigue of doing an album like this is I would love to be disputed or proven wrong, I guess. Like, so what sounds like my interpretation of denial for me, you
Yeah.
might disagree with. And I love the idea that because grief is so personal and so specific to an experience, I love the idea that someone might want to listen in a different order, or they might reorder the album and go, this one feels like it should follow this, and that's how I experience things. So it's, for me, it came from, I guess, a structure, but the intention is for it to be modular. And if people disagree, then that's great. But I have my interpretations for each of the songs, I guess.
And do the interludes have a function where they make sure that these songs are separate? So you have to kind of take them really as separate. They can't, one can't run into the other, say.
I guess it's the opposite of that for me,
Right.
where like because the interludes have like a function, as it were, musically, in that each of the songs is in a different key,
Yeah.
and in wanting the whole album to sound like almost one track, which you can identify different markers and go, oh, okay, I think this is when we're transitioning from this stage into this. But in trying to blend those 5 themes into a more fluid experience where it's like, okay, anger and bargaining shouldn't feel necessarily like, as you say, like a checklist to tick off. There will naturally be some ebb and flow between those stages. And I wanted to reflect that musically, but also to, I guess, solve the problem of I'm in D minor. How do I go to C sharp minor without it sounding really stark? So they serve a function in that sense to try and keep everything naturally transitioning rather than like a hard on or off.
So that takes me on to the listening guide booklet, which is a lovely piece of work, and we'll talk about
Thank
illustration
you.
stuff. But with every song, you note what the key is, and
Mhm.
also a color as well. So can you explain those things?
Sure. So there's a concept which I hope I'm not using incorrectly, because this is a lot less of a formal thing that one I think can be diagnosed with. But there's um, a concept called synesthesia, which
Yeah.
is, I guess, associating sound with different colors or hearing sound in different like visual palettes. And I have a strong connection with at least the songs I write to a certain aesthetic or a certain color. So each of the songs, for me, being in different keys indicates them as different colors, and that's usually the color palette that I'll use for the artwork and for the music video. For example, the final track in the album, Jigsaw, is in A minor, and for me, A minor is a deep blue, sorry, a deep green, and the video is set to a deep green palette with like hints and flurries of different colors that accent changes in the mood or in the song, but it's rooted in this certain color palette. So I wanted to include that as an extra, I guess, as a little Easter egg for if I'm going to explain my process, I might as well explain the bits that feel a bit more on the fringe, shall we say, or possibly more refutable, or if someone could go, actually, no, what are you talking about? This song isn't green. This song is obviously brown, or this song is obviously orange, like whatever. Like it sort of all comes back to this. I don't know if you ever had like days of the week socks.
Well, I've not.
Um,
I'm aware that they have been a thing. Yeah.
I had those in high school, and my friend also had them, but they were in a different, like they were the exact same company, but they were just printed in different colors.
Right.
And it got us talking in the practice rooms because he's a piano player, and we were like, "This is really weird." For me, Monday is yellow because my socks say they're yellow, or like not always denoting from the socks. But in this experience, he was like, "No, Monday's this. I've got blue Monday socks." And then we started talking about what keys feel different colors, and we disagreed about everything until we got to F, and we said brown, right? Yes, thank you. Moving on, and it was just this weird moment of, okay, so I guess we do have these like um multi-medium associations, and some of them feel very like we would die on these hills.
Yeah, yeah.
And I thought that was really interesting. I wanted to include that as part of the process because it's what I think about when I do it.
I think if you experience sound, say for instance, which is a fundamental thing, and that's how you experience it, then
Mm,
yeah, that's you would say, no, this is my truth, and it's the right one.
yeah. Well, right for
Otherwise,
me at
your whole
least.
system might be kind of thrown. You mentioned Jigsaw there. Am I right in saying that was kind of the first track of this?
Yes. Yeah, so in looking back, it wasn't the first track that I wrote for this album, but it was the first track that I guess, adopted the concept of the album knowingly. I thought, all right, well then it was following a breakup, and there's always this period after a like depression or sadness that I experience where you start to think, actually, you know what? I'm okay as I am. I think I'm ready to feel balanced and I'm not just feeling bereft or like missing a part anymore. And usually that's when the next thing happens, not as like a get kicked while you're down, but for me, it's like in a relationship sense, for example, as soon as you're okay with being on your own, something else happens and you immediately meet someone that you go, actually, no, we need to be in contact or whatever. But yeah, in terms of Jigsaw, it was the first track that I released originally because these 5 tracks, the main singles on the album, were previously released. But in writing the interludes and revisiting it all, I re-recorded a lot of parts, added more parts, and then remixed and remastered them to then all put it out so that it sounded uniform. But I believe you would have played Jigsaw when I first sent it to you, which was November 2020. So
Wow,
it's been a bit of a longer process, and that isn't even the first song that I wrote that ended up on the album, I guess.
Uh, the imagery, which is kind of across strongly again in everything we've spoken about, is you've got Jigsaw, which you have to put together. You've got the Kintsugi, which you're putting together, and you've got this album, which similarly, with pieces that you've had over the years, you've put
Mm-hmm.
together. Was there anything written specifically for this when you knew that you were going to be creating an album from these songs?
So all of the interlude tracks definitely were the final piece. As I said, like the first 5 tracks that had been written, some of them were pieced together. God, I ended up writing, I think, over a decade ago, and then revisited it. And then I thought, oh, wait a minute, this feels like this stage that can slot in where I was missing something. Jigsaw was definitely written with intention, and then Plasticast came fairly quickly after that. Um, Tower was definitely actually, wait a minute. I think most of them were written after I'd come up with the concept,
Right, okay.
but the concept itself had been like spawning little ideas, and then I finished these ideas with an intention, going, "Oh, I think it sounds like this," even if it was I wrote a song like in the moment, and then when it comes to like recording it and rearranging it, at that point I was like, okay, I think I know what I want this to sound like, and I think there are a couple of tweaks that can be made to make it fit more to theme. But a lot of these ideas tended to just sort of happen as songs, and then I would adopt them. But the interludes were purely written with intention after I had the main structure and the idea in the 5 songs to go, all right, how do I stitch this together to make it this complete
Yeah.
project, I guess.
So without wanting to hammer the point home, the interludes are the golden glue that you're using to kind of put
As
the.
I see them, yeah, at least the threads that can pull you from one stage to the next.
And I want to talk about the artwork of the album and the notebook as well. It's some
Hmm.
gorgeous stuff. Is that your work?
Thank you. It is. There are in the notebook. I've mentioned there were a couple of the single artworks when the tracks originally came out in their first form. Um, Plasticast was done by Tyler Mortimer, who also did an animated music video for it. And the artwork for Jigsaw was a still that was taken from the music video that was shot and edited by Matthew Dunsmore. Um, and and then was regraded by Perry Johnson. But the rest of the like drawn aspects, the other 3 singles artwork were my own, and then the visual art for Kintsugi was me as well.
And if where can people get the album and the notebook? Because I think it would be, for me, it's important to have the two together because it really does break down what we've been talking about in much greater detail.
I'm glad to hear you say that. Thank you. I was worried halfway through that it would just be the ramblings of a madman, and that other people don't
Oh,
necessarily interpret music the way I do, and it's useless to them. But the album is available on all major streaming profiles, but it's also on Bandcamp. I instead of releasing CDs for this, I made a collection of bookmarks which have artwork from the album on the front, handwritten lyrics from different songs on the back, and have like QR code download codes from Bandcamp, or you can just get the full album digitally. And the notebook as well is available as merch on the same Bandcamp page. But I have them in person as well. So whenever I'm at gigs, I have them there if people don't like the idea of postage for whatever reason.
I'm talking about gigs. You launched it at the Piano Dome in Edinburgh in September. Is that right?
I did.
So how was that? How was it? What was it like to? Well, I guess you played these songs before, but to play
Mm-hmm.
them all as a single kind of unit, how was that?
Yeah, it was definitely a challenge though, because as you said, I'm very familiar with the songs, but this would this was the first time that I was going to try, and it ended up feeling, for me at least, more like a show than a gig, because I was trying to like lay out the set list with songs not from the album and songs from the album, because it was a solo gig and I was playing acoustically. There were some of the interlude tracks that didn't work as well, um, like just accompanying myself. So I like replaced a couple of tracks here or there, but the whole set did follow the arc of the album and the arc of the um, Kubler-Ross Stages of Grief, which I think allowed for like a few more tracks that aren't on the album that do fill that like in between gap, or you know, as as a fairly standard singer songwriter, most of my tracks fall under the depression scale. So it allowed me to like, I guess, keep everything in the same flow and the same sonic place without putting so much pressure on it being only the album, or allowing myself to like add in other songs as well. So it turned out really well. It was a challenge though to, I guess, turn it into it was about an hour 15 set of,
Right.
because the concept album is, I call it an album because it feels like it took the time that
Yeah.
an album would take to write, but it's only 25 minutes long. I've called it an album and friends have called it an EP back to me, and I go, I don't think it's an album, but fair enough. But it was really fun to, I guess, sit back into this doesn't just have to be, hi, here's a song. Hi, here's a different song. It's like there is a narrative throughout that I hoped to be able to pull the audience through as well, and have the songs be the main storytelling within it. And there's a start, there's an end. We're all going to go through it together, and then hopefully by the end we've all learned or let loose of something, or felt something.
Yeah. And have you any plans to maybe play again live with the album?
Yeah, I'd really like that. I'm currently looking at because I'm currently on tour just now, hence why I'm in Canada. I've got a string of dates here and then a couple more dates that I'm still adding to when I get back into Scotland and the UK, as it were. But my hope is that I would love to do it as like a headline almost show again, because I really enjoyed that as a as a form of performance rather than picking small pieces. And now that I've done that as the full set, some of these gigs here feel a bit more like I'm picking and choosing little bits because I don't have an hour and 15
Sure.
as a slot. But now that I've done it, I definitely want to revisit it. So hopefully in the new year. But I filmed and recorded the album launch, and I'm currently working on mixing that and editing that into a video. So my hope is to release it as a full gig and a full live album as well.
Oh, fantastic. So when you do that, let me know and I'll
I
let
will do.
know as well.
Thank you.
Jack, thanks so much for taking the time to talk to me. It's a fascinating album and taken as a whole, just a wonderful project. I think It really does make you think about, your own experience as well, which I think is what the best art does in the whole. So thanks again.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Appreciate that.
And this is Jack Hinks and the Emperor.